And just to sort of frame the type of groups that might fall into, you have, if you look at their level of spending on the y-axis and their share of income of how much they're spending on their x-axis, you can see that there is a small segment, we call it the fashion fanatics. It's a segment that is not spending that much in total. It's not wealthy, it's upper middle class, but they're willing to spend 40, 50% of their income on luxury goods. Very important segment to think about as it's emerging. You have obviously the very wealthy luxury role models, so to speak, that spend a lot in total, even if less of their income, and you have some other sort of more core segment and middle class segment emerging. Moving to talk about the geography of China. So China is very, very big. It's the size of US, clearly, and Canada in size, only smaller than Russia. 800 cities or so, 200 cities of 1 million people plus. That's about 7 times as many cities of that size in Europe. And interestingly, there's also more and more wealthy consumers, not only in the more famous cities like Shanghai and Beijing, but also in cities like Foshan, which is, by the way, similar to the size of Denver and going to be double in terms of Denver size in number of wealthy consumers, which many people around the world have never heard about, most likely. One way to illustrate how the smaller cities are becoming more important, if you look at Beijing, Beijing is the biggest luxury market, or second biggest compared with Shanghai. Clearly, those are the 2 mega cities. Beijing today, we estimated at over $1 billion of luxury goods sales conservatively. It's going to more than double in the next 5 years. Hangzhou, a smaller city, still top 10 cities, top 5 for some brands, is going to actually be the size of Beijing in 5 years. And relatively small market like Wuhan is going to be almost the size of Hangzhou in 5 years. So actually in a decade, some of the very small, relatively smaller markets could actually be the size of the biggest market in China. So you have more and more relevance and opportunities for luxury brands all across the country. And this breaks down a little bit how that splits. If you look at the overall demand, we believe by 2015, about 20% of it will come from the 2 big cities, 30% from the next 9 cities, and about 26 from 25 other cities. So about 75% of demand from 36 major cities. Moving from that to talk briefly about just sharing a few of the highlight consumer trends that I think will help you put this in context of opportunity also for the diamond business. So let me start by the age of the consumers. Chinese consumers, for some brands, they're seeing consumers that are 10, even 20 years younger than other countries. You can see in China, compared to UK and France, in particular the group of 18 to 34, which is almost half the consumers in China, much, much younger than what it is in other markets, and very optimistic. So in fact, in particular amount, the wealthier consumer, most of them are not only happy today, but they actually believe they will make a lot more income in the future. And many of them have the evidence of having more than doubled their income in the previous 5 years. The other thing that stands out is people in China, yes, they have more money, but they're also spending on luxury goods quite furiously. Often there's comparison to Japan and other big markets, some refer to as the mass market for luxury goods. But actually, Chinese consumer, those that spend on luxury are spending more of their income than those in Japan, and in particular, the less wealthy ones. So again, think about that huge growth to up to 28% of urban households, about 70 million consumer by 2015. And imagine if more of them would spend on luxury, and they would spend up to 14% of their income on luxury. And they are actually willing to pay, and in particular, they're willing to pay even full price, again, more so than other markets. And many consumers have told us they don't even want to buy on discount. Many people still prefer discount, of course, but some feel that they've earned the right to pay prices, so to speak, as they want to experience the luxury lifestyle. And they're getting more sophisticated. Another example here from jewelry, if you look at the number of brands that people could recall, about 2 years ago, very few could recall more than one real luxury brand. Often, it would be Cartier or Tiffany or, some of the very same brands. But nowadays, there is almost 3 times appreciation for jewelry brands. So, clearly the market is changing very, very fast, and consumers that used to be able to only focus on 5 brands, 87% of consumers gave us the same 5 brands when we asked them. Now we actually see, a third of them starting to mention smaller brands as well. Another aspect of getting more knowledgeable is the fact that they're aware internet is a big part of that. They're aware that price gap, the fact that China is actually taxing quite heavily for luxury consumption, and they can buy it cheaper in Hong Kong. And in fact, many consumers have told us, as they have more experience, that they're even more aware of that. The other thing that is very, very unique about Chinese consumer, more extreme so than many other markets, is they're equating expensive products with better products. And in fact, many brands have gone through the exercise of being forced, we call this reverse price wars, being forced to increase their price in order to maintain a certain image. Because if my competitor is more expensive than me, the Chinese consumer could think that I'm not good enough, I'm not the ultimate ultra luxury brand. But that trend is slightly starting to change, still very significant in China. And you can see that it comes together with consumers looking for greater quality. They're actually becoming more and more aware of what's behind the substance of the brands. Another very important and very relevant, I think, in the context of diamonds is the importance that consumers have to this idea of lasting value. And I mentioned in diamonds that the idea of value preservation has been a big part of what has helped drive faster growth in diamonds. And this is true across all of luxury brands. Consumers prefer to buy items that seems to be of lasting value, that seems to be more classic. And again, this is true for the wealthy and less wealthy consumers. The other thing is, this whole question around our Chinese consumer, with all the fakes, are they not just, why would they try to buy the authentic products? But in fact, many consumers feel quite strongly that they want authentic products. They are willing to pay 2, 3, 4 months of salary on an item because, it gives them a certain level of, obviously, status, but in many cases also, personal achievement, and they want to buy the real thing, whether it's jewelry or watches or luxury goods. The other, complementary trend is the fact that they prefer more understated luxury goods. Now, there's still a lot of bling in China. There's still a lot of flashy consumers, but there's a growing number of understated consumers. And many of them are particularly around the younger consumer, the upper middle class, coming into the market with expectation to be more subtle, with being more reserved about showing off luxury goods. And wanting luxury goods that are more exclusive, again, things that are only for them. The amount of special collectible items in China and the willingness, many of them are being only sold these days in China or Asia, and Chinese consumers are actually willing to pay much more for that benefit of having something others don't than many consumers in other places around the world. They don't necessarily want to stand apart. They want to have something that only they have. And the growth of luxury goods is not only in goods, it's actually spread to many areas, including services. And you can see, in particular, high-end entertainment travel growing fast as well. Finally, the last consumer trend that we're seeing, it's emerging. It's probably in jewelry, it's the strongest because of the importance of local or Hong Kong-based jewelry retailers like Chow Tai Fook, that we see much more interest in local design, local influences. It could be diamonds, but is the design more Chinese in the way that it's been made? It could be very much foreign brands, but it could be Hermes launching Shangxia, doing things that are more tailored for the Chinese market. The Chinese consumers are getting so much attention from brands that are now selling to China as their biggest market in the world, and that's putting a high competitive bar on many other brands. And you can see that the smaller city consumer is even more sensitive, or the younger consumer, to having that aspect. Finally, I want to leave you with 5 thoughts that I've been sharing and hearing from different luxury brands and operators in China. I've referred to some of them, some I want to emphasize in addition. Clearly expansion with the opportunity in more cities in China. You want to expand and expand fast, but also, of course, for many of the branded, those of you that you're selling your diamonds to that are caring very much about how they're going to establish their brand, very important that they do it in the right way, obviously not rush it. And the Chinese consumer is becoming very demanding, in particular on service, which I'll talk about in a second. The second thing is the word of mouth in China is so important. The Chinese consumer is making its brand decision and making its purchase decision on what his peers are saying and thinking about brands. And with the growing importance of online and the growing importance of younger and less wealthy consumers, cultivating them as ambassadors for the brand. And obviously social, we talked, heard a lot about social media in the previous speech. I think it's a huge opportunity, both offline and online in China. It cannot be overstated the importance of in-store experience for Chinese consumer. They don't have history of buying. Many of them have bought luxury items for the first time in the last few years. They're very sensitive to what they're going to see in stores. Half of what influences the decision in our research is in-store touch points, and the delivering that experience in an attentive and knowledgeable way. Obviously, in a market that is quite deprived of also talent that would know how to handle the wealthy consumers is a major challenge and an important differentiator of performance for many brands. Online, much more so in luxury goods than even other areas in China. There's about 500 million consumers online now in China, but it's more importantly, it's everyone that are buying luxury goods, and they're actually more intense because they don't have access to information and access to knowledge from before as other markets. They're even more intensely online. Some of them would visit and research about luxury brands for months before making a purchase, or would visit websites almost on a daily basis to see what's new. And then finally, I talked about the point of tapping into local heritage. Not to say that everything needs to be Chinese. There's a huge premium paid for the global luxury history and heritage of brands, but there's also the expectation that brands would do things that are putting China much more at the center of how they design products, how they market products. Thank you, and I'll obviously address more questions in the panel.